Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. The case we're discussing today is difficult to fathom. A teacher taking the life of a pupil. Someone paid to not only enrich a child's life, but protect it as well. It goes without saying it's a rough topic, but always something anyone with a child in their lives can be aware of. As always, I invite you to join me as we remember Catherine Frances Erickson. Catherine, who her family called Kay, was born on April 22, 1940 in the neighborhood of San Pedro in California to parents Harry and Beatrice Erickson. From an early age, Beatrice enrolled Kay in dancing and piano lessons. In July of 1947, the Ericksons moved to Long Beach, California, where she continued dance lessons. Growing up, Kay was described as a normal child by teachers, maybe a bit immature. She possessed an IQ of 88, below normal for children her age, but she was very artistic and thrived in both singing and dance. Allegedly, Kay suffered from a stomach condition brought on by nerves. Her mother took her to faith healing services and churches where they practiced the act of cosmic ray healing. These sessions were described as heavenly cures conveyed through wires from the ceiling. These methods didn't seem to cure her of her ailments, so her mother decided to pursue another outlet to help Kay overcome her nerves. On June 28, 1948, she conferred with a man named Miguel Verdugo, aged 50, who was an accordion teacher. Miguel introduced Beatrice to Violet John Burling, who taught beginner students at the studio they shared in Long Beach, California. Violet was a 30-year-old woman who was the daughter of a vaudeville performer. She and Miguel were not only partners in the studio, but lovers as well. Violet held lessons on Monday, but mostly worked in the office taking calls and making appointments for Miguel, who paid the bills for the studio. Beatrice enrolled Kay in Violet's weekly lessons for $4 a week. In the beginning, Beatrice accompanied Kay to the studio, but as time went on and Kay became more comfortable, she would leave her there, sometimes all day, even late into the night. Violet put together a children's accordion quartet, which Kay was part of. The group met several times a week after school, and at times were asked to work overnight, where the children would sleep at the studio. On the surface, Violet was the ideal teacher. She provided gifts and trips for the children when they reached their milestones in their lessons. She even took them out to eat and had food brought in when lessons ran late. Violet seemed to be exactly what Kay needed at the time. Even by 1949, when the Ericksons couldn't make ends meet, Violet let her continue lessons for free, something she often did for the children under her tutelage. In May of 1950, Kay was in 4th grade and struggling to keep her grades up. Her teacher explained she was not going to pass. Her mother feared she was becoming too focused on her extracurriculars and wanted to stop lessons. Violet, however, expressed her concern for the girl giving up on the accordion. She explained to Beatrice that Kay had real talent, and it would be a shame if she gave up. In fact, she was convinced she could turn Kay into a successful musician. Around this time, Beatrice expressed problems at home. Her husband wasn't working, and their finances were causing a real strain on the marriage. Beatrice recently started classes to become a nurse's aide in hopes of bettering her family situation, while also working a full-time job. In response, Violet offered a strange request. She would look after Kay. Violet explained by having Kay full-time, she could expedite the process of Kay being a famous musician. Beatrice felt like she didn't have many options and wanted Kay to fulfill her dreams, so she pulled her out of school and gave guardianship to Violet until things got better at home. Violet officially took responsibility of Kay in July of 1950. 3 months later, she would be dead. Although Violet had an apartment in Long Beach, she chose to live at the studio due to inconveniences of traveling back and forth. She and Kay lived in the studio full-time, where she continued her lessons with her other classmates. As the weeks passed, Kay and Beatrice became more and more distant. She tried to come to the studio to see her daughter a few times, but during one instance, she claimed Violet asked her to stay away. Violet explained her presence made Kay play poorly. Without visitors around, she was less distracted from her instrument. When Beatrice came, Violet stated she lost her touch, and when that would happen, she wouldn't play for days. She only cried and felt bad because she couldn't perform up to her standard. Her mother didn't want to be the reason for her misery, so she tried not to disturb her by staying away. She also tried to attend Kay's recitals, but Violet did not invite the parents, stating the children's programs were private and they couldn't be bothered. No one had any idea what truly was going on behind the scenes. During the morning hours of October 12, 1950, a frantic call was made to emergency services. Per Violet, she fell asleep while writing music and Kay was in the adjoining room. She woke up to a sudden noise where she found Kay strapped to a chair. She was conscious and able to speak at the time. Her head was hanging down as though she was asleep, but her eyes appeared as if she were in a trance. She called Miguel, who called their doctor, Dr. Hansen. When Dr. Hansen arrived, Kay was already removed from the chair and laid on the couch. He described the girl being bound with a white shirt around her head in a bandana fashion, with arms tied around her neck. Dr. Hansen performed CPR until emergency services arrived, who declared the girl dead on arrival. Violet was under the impression Kay was alive as she was wheeled out of the studio. Her body was transported to the LA County morgue where an autopsy was performed. Kay's cause of death was announced as aspiration of vomit, and she died nearly 5 hours before Violet claimed she was found. During the autopsy, the coroner noted Kay was covered in a number of cuts, bruises, and abrasions. She was found to be 20 pounds less than that of normal weight of a 10-year-old girl. She was described as emaciated. The wounds found on her were not self-inflicted, and some were made just hours before she died, including certain burns found. Some of the injuries were superimposed on top of old ones. She also showed signs of assault as well, with tearing in her pelvic region. Her head sustained injuries caused by several blows, and her wrist and ankles had markings and indentions compatible with being tightly strapped down. The state of lividity found in her feet and legs were consistent with the story of Kay being strapped to a chair at the time of her death. The examiner determined the wounds found were sufficient enough to cause unconsciousness, which likely led to her death. Per Violet, Kay was fine before she went to bed, and she was not strapped to a chair. She insisted the girl was responsible for her injuries and for confining herself to the chair. At the time of her death, Violet was the only witness, and no direct evidence was found in the studio. But due to the circumstances of Kay's death and wounds discovered, it led investigators to believe Violet was guilty. Violet was arrested in mid-October of 1950, shortly after the completion of Kay's autopsy. Violet stated she'd never laid a hand on Kay and insisted she self-inflicted all of her wounds, including tying herself to the chair. These statements were all impossible per the investigation. Violet's trial started on January 3, 1951, where she testified that Kay was a troubled child and mentally ill. Her mother, on the other hand, explained that although Kay was a bit high-strung, she was a fairly healthy child. Violet testified Beatrice, the child's mother, had no idea what Kay was like, since she was never around. The relationship between Beatrice and Kay was strained per Violet. There was no affection exchanged, and any time Beatrice did visit, Kay hated every moment. After one visit, Violet alleged Kay wanted to never see her again, and even wanted to kill her family. The week before she died, Violet explained Kay started sleepwalking and falling in and out of trances. She also added that Kay loved to self-mutilate and heard voices. One time during her lessons, Kay played one note, then stopped mid-chord, falling into one of her supposed trances. When Violet asked why, she claimed her deceased grandfather made her quit. When she consulted Beatrice about Kay's recent behavior, she claimed Beatrice believed someone was practicing black magic on Kay. During one instance, Violet said she caught Kay harming herself, and when she asked her why, she said, "I like the pain." Violet tried to prevent the child from hurting herself, but she had to constantly be watched to do so. She admitted several times she did bind her to a chair to not only protect herself, but correct her posture while she was playing the accordion, apparently a common practice. Violet explained to the court at times it was like the child was possessed and prone to tantrums. Violet thought this defense would alleviate her punishment, but contradicting her testimony was that of her other students. Laura Carpenter, who was 9 at the time, took lessons with Violet for 2.5 years. Laura testified seeing Kay tied to a filing cabinet 2 or 3 days prior to her death in a standing position. She left her there for over an hour while her and Miguel left the studio for dinner. This happened several times. Kay was often strapped to a chair, and on one occasion, she tied her hands behind her back and left her on the floor overnight. Whenever the children were taken on excursions, Kay was not permitted to join the fun. During a movie, she tied a bandage over Kay's eyes so she couldn't watch. Violet kicked Kay when she didn't play correctly and encouraged the other children to do the same. Violet hit Kay with a number of objects, including a ruler and accordion straps. During one instance, Laura and the other students in the quartet, Jimmy and Joanne, were at the studio when Violet ordered Kay to remove her pants. She made her stand in front of the other children until they looked away. She threatened if any of them spoke a word about the happenings of the studio, something bad would happen. Laura commented she often saw Kay covered in bruises and cuts. Violet would put bandages and makeup on her to cover the wounds. Other students, Mary Jo Fury, saw Violet slap Kay in the face. After, she stated she wasn't scared to hit her in front of the other kids. Thelma Watts, who took lessons from Miguel, saw Kay in September of 1950. She stated Kay had black eyes and she could barely open them. Waitresses from the Panama Cafe, where Violet frequented with the children, testified the couple brought in Kay often. The child was quiet and didn't look happy with the couple. They were told the bruises on her were self-inflicted and they didn't push more. One waitress couldn't recall a single time when a meal was ordered for Kay. She would sometimes get crackers or small bites from the adults' plates, but not often. Kay wouldn't say anything around Violet or Miguel, especially about her injuries. The other students explained due to instilled fear, they wouldn't talk about the things that went on in the studio. Violet's trial lasted for 17 weeks. Although she was physically present, she spent most days falling unconscious. She claimed to be mentally absent for most of the trial, suffering from fainting spells throughout the testimonies. Her constant fainting resulted in the trial dragging on until the end of April 1951. The trial record showed 47 references to Violet's mental and physical condition between March 8, 1951 to April 12 of 1951, including 20 recesses granted for the reason of fainting, often extending from 5 minutes to several days. The jury deliberated for 8 days, returning a verdict. In the first-degree murder of Kay Erickson, Violet was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Violet collapsed in tears in the courtroom once the verdict was read. The jurors later stated they had no doubt of her guilt. All but 30 minutes of deliberations were centered on her degree of guilt. 1 year after her trial, Violet was granted a retrial on the grounds she was mentally absent during her original trial. Under California law, the defendant had to be present at every stage of a felony prosecution. During her second trial in May of 1953, she chose to not undergo another jury trial. The retrial only lasted a day, and the judge found her guilty of second-degree murder and again sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 7 years to be served. During a parole hearing years later, though, the board decided Violet needed to serve 50 years before being considered for release. Catherine Erickson was laid to rest in Westminster Memorial Park in California. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I tried to find information on what came of Violet, but I came up empty-handed. It might be safe to assume she perished in prison since at the time of conviction, she was already 32 and wouldn't be eligible for release until she was in her 80s, which would put us around 2003. But we're here for Kay and the innocent life that was taken in this horrible situation. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Thank you all so much for tuning in each and every week. I appreciate all of your kindness, your support, and your love. I wanted to ask here because I value your opinions, and I've been tossing the idea around for a while, but how does everyone feel about podcasts? I'm not sure if this would be the same cases I cover here, just in audio form, or if I would cover new cases. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? I'm all ears. I appreciate all of your input. Thank you so much in advance. But for now, we have to part ways. I hope you have an amazing week ahead of you and stay safe out there. I will see you all in the next one. Bye, friends.